If you thought that kneeling before Galactus was crazy enough in Marvel Snap, well, I've got news for you. Marvel Snap's latest card, Zombie Galacti, is absolutely insane, and you're going to be kneeling into a zombified mess where he's going to be transforming your cards into copies of him. Zombie Galacti is one of the most exciting cards to come to Marvel Snap in some time, and so you're going to have to rile up your undead hordes and get ready, because we're going to be talking about card synergies, decks, and most importantly, how you can maximize Zombie Galacti to its greatest effectiveness. Zombie Galacti is a 7/4 that reads, start of game, choose 6 other cards in your deck. On reveal, transform those cards into copies of this. This is potentially an immensely powerful card, especially when you consider your ability to get this to increase power levels and then convert those weaker cards you might have been using throughout the game into significantly more powerful cards. Cards including Shuri, which can double the power, do double dip on this ability to increase Zombie Galacti's strength in order to maximize its potential of winning locations and flipping games. Alright, so we're going to do a bit of a speed run here and talk about some of the cards that are particularly synergistic with Zombie Galacti. The first is Wasp. Wasp is usually a 0/1, but becomes a 0 whatever Zombie Galacti's power happens to be once it gets selected by Zombie Galacti itself, which is interesting, and it also is extremely flexible because let's say you're playing a Khonshu discard deck and you have Wasp, you top deck it with your MODOK, well, you can just play it down, it's free, you don't have to worry about that, right? You can choose when Wasp comes down, it's never going to be a detriment. Wasp is an excellent choice. Similarly, you have the Hood, where Wasp is just a free play. What's interesting about the Hood is it's such a massive delta of power. The Demon is obviously incredibly valuable, but with the Hood, you're going from 1 -3 to 1/4, 1/8 if you Shuri it, 1/12 if you Khonshu it. It's a massive change of power. It's a 15 swing if you want to put it that way, right? So it's very good to play the Hood in some of these decks, especially when you're trying to, generate some momentum and really take advantage of your Galacti effect. Similarly, Surge is fantastic because one of the challenges around Zombie Galacti is that it is a 7-cost card. So not only are you going to buff it by 1 by making it a 5 power, but you're also going to reduce its cost to 6 using Surge, which could potentially be beneficial in some decks. Moreover, Jennifer Kale provides you with a lot of flexibility as to when you can utilize that extra energy to get that Zombie Galacti out. Now, I'm not thinking that, the Jennifer Kale kind of extra energy route is going to be the preferred way to play Zombie Galacti, and we'll discuss that when we discuss the decks, but it's also worth mentioning that she's a great option. Something like a Luna Snow is too, but Luna Snow has a higher base power and is more expensive, whereas Jennifer Kale is cheaper, and guess what? Really benefits from that swing in power. Merlin is actually pretty interesting too because Merlin goes very well with some decks. In particular, if you're playing something like a Hood and you don't actually draw into your Zombie Galacti, you can polymorph that Hood. So there's options into how you can maximize your effectiveness. Something that I did note during the testing as well is that if you polymorph a card that has been selected by Zombie Galacti, even though it's not glowing, it'll still flip. I got video evidence of it. It still flips. So as a result, Merlin could potentially be a very interesting choice in those particular decks. Makari is super interesting because it is one of those cards that just dives itself out of your hand, which is cool because if it's been selected by that aura, you just want it on the field of play. Makari, though, is a little different than Wasp in the sense that it'll stay in your hand and you can't just relinquish it. So as a result, let's say you top deck it on turn 5 when you want to play your MODOK in a Khonshu deck, well, you're kind of stuck there. But overall, what you're going to see here is Makari being a very viable option in order to get an additional presence on the board that you can eventually flip with that Zombie Galacti. Hope Summers, once again, similar to Jennifer Kale, does allow you to kind of scale into that 7 energy if you're choosing to go that route. We have Shuri, which I think is going to be a mainstay in a lot of these decks. It's also worth knowing Shuri has seen a couple buffs over the time. She's a 4/3 now. It's been a while since Shuri's been meta. But the key thing about Shuri is just Shuri into Zombie Galacti generates an 8-power card, which in the case of a Hood goes from a 1 -3 to a 1/8. It's a pretty significant power change. Imagine how broken Makari would be if Makari was a 3/8. It's a very significant power spike, and Shuri enables that relatively straightforward. Then you have Galacta. Galacta's fantastic too, and can be utilized alongside Shuri if you think about it, because you're not usually playing your Zombie Galacti until turn 6 or 7 if you happen to be using magic. What you can do is actually set up Galacta first, play into the Shuri, then on turn 6 you're playing into the Shuri with the Zombie Galacti. You're getting the +2 from Galacta, and then you double dip on that with the Shuri. Galacta is a great choice. Khonshu, I think, is going to be the preferred way to play Zombie Galacti, and I'll be showcasing you a couple decks. But basically, Khonshu, you bring them back as a 5, which is not great, but I mean, at least you discard the Zombie Galacti, you bring them back with a single power buff, buff. Or, of course, you can go all the way upwards of 12. Not only do you get Conchu as a 6/12, you're also bringing back Zombie Galacti as a 6/12, and then changing everything else that is affected by his aura into a 6/12 as well. It's legitimately insane. We have the man himself, and then of course we have Arishem. Arishem's going to be an option as well because you have that extra energy, and you have some opportunity to perhaps take advantage of that extra energy by playing notably impactful cards on turn 5, things like, well, not necessarily Lyeth because its power level is kind of high, but you can still Lyeth if you want, but you can consider things like Leader, Dr. Doom, and then you can increase the power by flipping it with a Zombie Galacti that you've been buffing throughout the course of the game, although you are dealing with a little bit of reliability issues with, well, the 12 extra cards that were thrown into the deck with Arishem. Let's talk some decks. The primary place where I'm looking forward to playing Zombie Galacti is going to be in Conchu. As I mentioned in the podcast, I do think that the synergy here is immensely powerful, and it's going to be a deck build that it's going to require a little bit of nuance. As you can see here, there are cards that simply want to hit the field of play. You have Proxima Midnight, you have Wolverine, you have X-23. These are cards that when discarded just fall onto the field of play, and if they've been affected by the aura, well, that's just free real estate. It's going to flip to a higher power. You also have cards like Makari, which are going to run out. You have Moon Knight, which disrupts your opponent, but also will discard Wolverine. It'll discard Proxima Midnight. It'll discard Conchu. Lady Sif is guaranteed to hit Zombie Galacti if it's in your hand thanks to its 7 power. MODOK is a great option here, especially since most of these cards are going to be on the field of play, and Scorn is a bit of an odd one out. You could consider replacing Scorn or any card you're missing with something like a Corvus Glaive if you wish. The advantage of Corvus Glaive in a deck like this would be that it allows you to physically play your Zombie Galacti, but I don't know if you want to do that. You're after that Conchu synergy, right? So that's why I went with a deck like this. Overall, my testing was very positive. I found that the deck performed very well, and in time, I'm sure we'll come up with more optimal lists. But this is a great starting point for you who are looking to cook. Let's say you want to do things a little differently and you want to play Zombie Galacti the old-fashioned way. Well, you're going to need 7 energy for that, and Arishem happens to be the precise card for you. In this particular style of deck, you're not only running Quinjet to take advantage of things that Arishem will generate, but of course you're leaning into the Zombie Galacti potential plays, with cards like Merlin, Makari, and then you're buffing pretty much everything alongside Phastos, Shuri, Gwenpool, and Galacta. What's also interesting is if you have your Zombie Galacti getting a bunch of buffs from Galacta, Gwenpool, and others, maybe you can afford on turn 5 to play something like a Leader because it has a potential very high impact on the board state, but most importantly, you can flip that into a higher power play with Galacti. Plus, we haven't seen Leader in a while, so I figured we'd splash him into a deck. Dr. Doom's interesting as well. You know, you create those Doom bots, you generate 15 power across the board, and then you flip the Dr. Doom into whatever greater strength Zombie Galacti happens to have. It's a potentially interesting deck worth considering. Zombie Galacti is the perfect closer to what has been a very interesting season alongside the Horde and Zombie cards in Marvel Snap. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you on the next one.